Alright guys, talking about the Formula 1 news, the drama with Ferrari continues just one day after big rumours emerging that Ferrari might miss the start of the shakedown in Barcelona after a delay behind the scenes. New reports coming out of Italy say nothing to worry about at all. Yes, there might be some things going on behind the scenes at Ferrari that we will get into, but their option for this season is less talk and more action on the track. We shall see whether that is truly what transpires over the coming weeks. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. These are the date in question. They're calling it a shakedown in Barcelona. Of course, it's not going to be broadcast. They've made the decision, Formula 1, despite, let's be honest, massive interest in watching these cars on track in Barcelona for the first time, to not broadcast any of it. That decision is probably being made because there might be some concerns, right? There are concerns about reliability, what these cars are going to perform like, and maybe they don't want the bad look for Formula 1 that might be compared to what they're expecting when they turn up for the test, when they've got a little bit of mileage under their belt. We'll see, but in Bahrain, we do have the official tests, pre-season test 1, pre-season test 2. These are the dates, 2 weeks after that, effectively. We go to Melbourne. This is Cadillac's car for the Barcelona shakedown. So again, they've got a special livery for the shakedown, but we're not going to see it, at least not officially. But this is the official livery that Cadillac are running, and actually it's pretty damn nice. It's pretty much just a carbon looking car, but it's kind of painted in a shade of carbon fiber in a way. Got the Cadillac logo on the back of it. These are some of the different angles of the renders that we have seen today. So you're like excited to see this car on the track, but obviously we won't be seeing so through proper lenses. We'll be seeing through people's lenses from miles away from the track that are zooming in and trying to get the best shots they can. This is actually a close-up of the nose. They have, I think Williams did this, didn't they, with all their names of their team on the car recently. This is what the nose is going to look like of that Cadillac machine, with all the names of effectively the founding team at Cadillac written as follows. So if you know anyone who works there, feel free to try and zoom in and find it. But yes, that is what Cadillac are working on. Speaking of liveries, Red Bull put this on their Instagram today, looking back at our first livery. So it's only a few days away, only a couple of days away I think now, from Red Bull unveiling their livery in Detroit. It will be Red Bull and Racing Bulls unveiling everything. They put this out there, their first Red Bull livery, and, well, it's interesting because we know that next season they are going back. They've already done so in their overall logo to having the white outline on the Red Bull logo, as you can see in this image here. It's almost certain that that will be on the car next season, that the Red Bull will be outlines in white for the first time in near enough a decade. Will that coincide with a substantial change to the livery that we have grown accustomed to in recent seasons? I think they will change something, given all these rumours and the fact that Red Bull have heavily hinted at it. I'd be pretty surprised if they don't and they just keep everything the same. But what are they going to do? These are a couple of concept designs that Xiao Rai and Nayar put together again. I think these are pretty sensational, actually. The one that I probably wouldn't go for is this one at the bottom. It's actually quite a nice electric blue, but we've got lots of blues right up and down the grid, so maybe not, although I do actually really like it. I just think that it's not quite as Red Bull. If I had to choose here, I think you probably know which one I'd choose. I'd have this one, this purple one. This is kind of the old livery that I remember from the Infinity days. This is a beautiful livery in my opinion. But look, will Red Bull go down this route, going for the option number 1, more similar to that original logo we looked at a second ago, livery we looked at a second ago, looks a lot like a Red Bull can. There's option number 2, which is kind of more similar to what we currently have. Again, I'm expecting this bull to be outlined in white, as we have seen a couple of times now in their leaked branding and stuff. But this third option is probably, I hope that Red Bull have something like this. It would be nice to see. Maybe a bit more white on the car is absolutely possible and probably quite likely, given some of the recent teasers. But anyway, these are just some ideas as to what Red Bull might unveil in the coming days. What Racing Bulls have today unveiled are these. These are the Racing Bulls suit. I think most people would probably agree that the Racing Bulls livery was one of the best, if not the best, that we had last season. Their racing suits are continuing that philosophy. Bit of that Cash App green on the logo here, or on the suit here. Of course, we've got Liam Lawson and Arvid Lindblad. That's the lineup for next year. How they'll get on, time will only tell. Also depends a fair bit on how good the car is. But that's the Red Bull update. The other one is actually coming out of Max Verstappen. He says the following, asked if he will continue in Formula 1. I'm 28 now and I have a contract with Red Bull until 2028. I intend to fulfill it. At this point in time, I rule out a team change. So I think that kind of says everything, right? At this point in time, there is no intention to move anywhere, but of course, things could quite radically change depending on what happens next season with Red Bull and, of course, Red Bull powertrains as well. But it's all a relative game. Maybe Red Bull aren't where Mercedes are, but if they're better than Ferrari, then still it puts Max in a position where he could have some confidence remaining in that Red Bull team and won't be straight on the phone to Lawrence Stroll or, of course, to Toto Wolff that you might expect. Speaking of driver changes, this was an official confirmation today coming out of Alpine that they've parted ways by, I think, what they described as mutual agreement with Jack Doohan. What a disastrous season in many respects for Alpine. First of all, they were last in the championship, but also for Doohan. Doohan, he had the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix last year that he raced in. He was, he didn't crash, right? That's about all you can say about that performance. Then he started the season. Look, was Colapinto better than Doohan was in the stint that he had? Look, I think he probably was, but also he got longer, right? Like if Doohan had the same amount of races as Colapinto did, they were pretty similar in that respective timeline. But unfortunately for Doohan, the writing was on the wall as soon as Alpine decided to sign Colapinto from Williams, given that they didn't necessarily need to in the circumstances, but they wanted to because of, well, at least in part, some of the financial backing he's bringing in from South America. So unfortunately, unless Doohan was right on Gasly's level immediately, which is tough, Gasly's a quality driver with big experience in that team, then he was always going to find his way out the door. The moments such as in Suzuka, when he had the DRS open in turn 1 because he tried it in the simulator, those didn't help his case, of course. But the drama with Doohan really was that mid-season, when Colapinto was struggling to find his feet a little bit, Doohan was supposedly, I think Briatore denies this, although apparently he said it in an interview, so nobody really knows what's happening. But supposedly, the team spoke to Doohan and said, we might put you back in, Sunshine, right? We're thinking about it. Stick around. There could be an opportunity here. Probably never really with the intention to do that, and they certainly never did that. So Doohan sees that Alpine is an absolute dead end for him to get back into Formula 1. Look, let's be honest, his chances of getting back into Formula 1 anyway are particularly slim as it stands, but I don't think it's going to be happening with Alpine. So he's decided to go elsewhere, seek other opportunities. Look, maybe there are other opportunities in different motorsports that he could explore. I guess we'll see. Probably the end of Jack Doohan in F1 after this most recent season, but you never know. Just Briatore was not going to give him that opportunity, right? So they officially part ways as of today. But let's talk about the 2026 drama. Just a quick update on what's going on with the engines. It remains to be seen just how important this compression ratio drama will be. But I'm sure you guys have all heard about it now. The idea that Mercedes and possibly Red Bull, maybe because they took on some staff from Mercedes and they gave them the secrets, are using special materials or techniques to increase the compression ratio and hence the power generated from a given amount of fuel during operation of an engine compared to when it's at static ambient temperature when it's actually getting tested. Now, there's so much controversy about this because the other teams seem to be convinced, according to all the reporting, that Mercedes are kind of cheating the rules here. But how do you test it? You can't. And the engines will all change their compression ratio to some degree when they're operational. The question is, how much are they getting changed? Is it more on the Mercedes car? If it is, how do we know? How do we know they're breaking the rules? Are they breaking the rules? It's being tested at ambient temperatures. All these things, very complicated. They're having a meeting on it in the coming days. January the 22nd is the date where the teams apparently are going to say something here. Now, is this a political game? That's what James Vowles effectively said, that he doesn't think this is a big deal. Now, he's Mercedes powered with Williams, so take that as you will. But he was of the opinion that they're kind of doing this, the other teams, to put some pressure on Mercedes, get the regulators looking more closely at their engine because they're just expected to have a good, powerful position competitively. So makes sense the other teams are going to try what they can politically to get an upper hand here. Whatever is the truth behind this, we don't know how relevant this will be to the season. As I said at the time, in my opinion, this compression ratio trick it's an incredibly obvious loophole in many ways. The regulations are written that the compression ratio has to be 16:1 and it'll be tested at ambient temperatures. It's like you can't find too many more obvious opportunities to say, well, could we make it more in certain conditions? Now, to be fair, those regulations have been relatively recently updated with that wording, but given that there's thousands of staff working on this stuff, It feels to me that there's probably something else going on here, and this won't be the key talking point, but AMUS say that based on the developments in recent days, the FIA are not going to ban this. They're not going to come out on the 22nd and say, sorry, Mercedes, your engine that you're trying to run in Barcelona in a couple of days, that's now illegal. Good luck with that. That's not going to be happening. The more likely scenario is that maybe mid-season and probably 2027, I would imagine, they might change things around, kind of like with DAS. I know that DAS is very different to what we're talking about here, but it's kind of the same idea. Mercedes turned up with dual-axis steering, and then they were told, well, you kind of got us, but next year we're going to make sure that is not going to be allowed. But the key talking point yesterday was on Ferrari and what may or may not be going on over there. So, Auto Racer, well connected with Ferrari, quality Italian journalism, they say that there's a delay in their final configuration. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world. As we described yesterday, they think they might still be able to make it to Barcelona on time, but there's something they needed to change. They made several late changes before assembly, which required new testing, which means that the chassis has only just officially been signed off. Crash testing, you'd imagine, is pretty much done as well. And they're ready to go within reason, but there's a little bit of chaos behind the scenes. A few things that they needed to change. We talked yesterday whether that's positive in terms of being aggressive with their development, or whether that's a negative because they've got something wrong and now they've got to solve it last minute. But depending on who you ask, you will get a different answer to this question. Now, that reporting yesterday combined with a report from Motorsport Italia that a few teams, I mean, they described at least a couple, potentially including a top team as they described them, will be arriving late, or certainly are in danger of arriving late in Barcelona, maybe only running on the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But as we said yesterday, what if the weather's pretty bad on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? You might not get the running in. You're allowed to run 3 of the 5 days of the week. So ideally, you want to be there Monday to make sure that if the weather goes south in the latter half of the week, at least you can still get a good few days of testing done. But Ferrari, there's other things going on here. We'll get to that in a second, but I did want to discuss because, again, the press in Formula One sometimes is quite confused, and even coming out of Italy. I mean, we've got multiple reports coming out of Italy in the case of a couple of days which don't precisely contradict one another, but they certainly are not all saying the same thing. So who knows where Ferrari are going to be, but there's a feeling that it's a pretty chaotic preparation phase. But then a different report coming out of Motorsport Italia today says that actually on the Ferrari side, they will be fine. Yes, there may have been a couple of teams that didn't quite go to plan, but the author here says that no delays on the SF25. There are no delays or problems. The Ferrari SF26's development is proceeding according to the schedule planned. The fire-up is scheduled for the end of the week, but this is just a symbolic step, etc., etc. The car is not aerodynamically equipped yet. It's got undergoing work. We know that there's going to be Spec A, Spec B, Spec B plus whatever over the coming weeks. But yeah, the article effectively says they've got the shakedown coming soon as well, in addition before the Barcelona one where they unveil the car for real. So, of course, that's probably going to be a very different version. The key thing really that was noted was the following. Beneath the snow of this bitterly cold winter, Maranello is buzzing with activity, yet quietly. The aim is to put a clean break from a disappointing 25 season, which ended with a 4th place finish in the Constructors, and prepare for a restart. The feeling, less talk and more action. So here we go, baby. Just interesting, right? You've got one part of the Italian press, they're saying, oh, there's some concerns that Ferrari is a bit chaotic. Then you've got this article coming out that effectively says, no, everything is fine. And this year is our year, right? We're going to do less talking and we're actually going to deliver more on the track. Good idea for sure. But let's see what actually happens. So this is the plan. The crash test has been passed, according to the article. Ignition's coming soon. The engine, the gearbox, they've got to do some tests there, so no issues. But a low profile will be kept in Maranello. They're going to do their talking on the track. But they're also doing their talking behind the scenes in the staffing room, because apparently Fred Vasseur is continuing to make some changes, because Auto Racer come up with another article today that says there are some big movements happening behind the scenes. So, well, a couple of things noted here. One of which is, I think it's John Lockwood, will leave the racing department. So he is currently, well, no, not anymore, but he was the head of composite design at Scuderia Ferrari F1. Now, it looks like Fred Vasseur is not in this image, but it looks like Fred Vasseur is making some changes. Now, this happened at every team. It's natural staff turnover to an extent, but it is interesting timing when the car's just about to launch, really. You've got the head of composite design. Is he getting fired? Not necessarily, right? He's moving into the Ferrari hypersail ocean racing project, which is the absolute classic of these big Formula 1 teams now. Where, I mean, every team has done this, Mercedes or like with Ineos or whatever, Red Bull, Adrian Newey did a bit on sailing. Because there's a lot of parallels, right? It's hydrodynamics rather than aerodynamics, but fundamentally pretty similar in terms of flow, materials, and that kind of construction, also very critical. Many of these big manufacturers, big Formula 1 teams, ever since they haven't been able to spend as much in F1 because of the cost cap, they were like, okay, what do we do with this extra 100 million or whatever that we're not allowed to spend anymore? Maybe let's also do something that we can potentially have transferable value in Formula 1. That's what a lot of the teams have done in recent years, and Ferrari hypersail is no exception. So look, this could be actually a positive move. John Lockwood might have done a great job with F1, and it's now okay, he's moving on. Composite design makes sense. There's some transferable skills there. Moving into the racing department with Ferrari hypersail. But it's definitely an interesting timing of this transition, especially because there are some other movements happening behind the scenes as well. The article went on to describe that there are some staff moving from the WEC project, the WEC World Endurance Championship project, of course, which has had so much success in the hypercar category the last couple of years, winning Le Mans the last couple of years in a row. And of course, in WEC, there's always talk about balance of performance and all these other things and how that could be counted in play. There was also recent talk last season, especially when Fred Vasseur was rumoured to be getting sacked round about the Montreal Grand Prix, that the head man at the WEC project for Ferrari was the ideal replacement for Vasseur in the eyes of John Elkann and the top guys at Ferrari. Of course, that never happens, but you do have to wonder who's making the calls here, right? Is this Ferrari themselves saying, look, Fred, your team ain't doing very well, but Formula 1 is absolutely fundamental importance to us. Maybe the balance of performance situation is going to change in WEC in the coming season, so we're not necessarily going to be able to dominate as we previously have done at Le Mans recently. So maybe it's okay, we'll bring some staff over to F1, or maybe it's Fred Vasseur calling those shots. With Ferrari, you never really know. When you look at a team like Red Bull historically with Christian Horner, when you look at a team like Mercedes with Toto Wolff, if big decisions are getting made, you can be pretty sure that they're coming from those men, the Horners and the Wolffs respectively. Whereas at Ferrari, you never really know where the decisions are coming from. Is Fred Vasseur the only man in charge? No, that's not how it works with the politics at Ferrari. So when these decisions are made, you got to wonder, is that Vasseur calling the shots because he believes that's how to best reshape the team? Is he taking any ideas from Hamilton, Leclerc to try and make that happen? Ideally, you would say yes, but also with the power of John Elkann and Benedetto Vigna and the other key figures at the leadership top part of Ferrari, who knows who's making these calls, and who knows if they're going to be good decisions or not when we look back at this down the line. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Just to finish out with a pretty disheartening statistic, if you're a Charles Leclerc fan, he's had plenty of DNFs, DNSs and DSQs in his career. Quite a few three-letter acronyms of which Charles Leclerc was dominating some of the tables. His pole to win conversion rate, Leclerc, is 5 out of 27 attempts. Now, of course, a lot of that was from the 2023 season. The SF23 was an absolute superstar in qualifying, especially in Leclerc's hands, but it was an absolute tire muncher in the race, and the RB19, it was a rocket ship. So, kind of unfortunate that Leclerc has that record, but it is what it is. I think it's honestly more impressive, like the number of poles he's secured, rather than the number of wins from pole, but look, he's 5 out of 27 from poles. His DNF, DNS, DSQ rate is nearly the same out of all the Grand Prix he has participated in. So hopefully next season for Charles treats him a little bit better. Ferrari will have a large part to play in that. So very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.